channel. If you're new here, then a very big hello. My name is Louise. I am currently on my second year of my IEC visa. So I moved from the UK to Canada, and my YouTube is me documenting my whole experience. So if you're thinking about doing the move, I've got some really useful and helpful videos. If you're someone who just likes watching vlogs, then I do a day off vlog every single Monday with what I get up to here in Canada. So if you've been watching my videos recently, then you will know that I've recently just took the English test. This test is something that I need to pass to be able to continue my journey to permanent residency here in Canada. Now I'm going to make a whole video on what the Ielts test is, what's in it. I'm going to literally break down everything, the cost, how to book it in another video. I just thought this video would be all about my experience of the Ielts test, and especially doing the Ielts test during the pandemic. I just thought I would share my experience, tell you what questions I had, let you know how long it was, but I am going to be doing a more in-depth video next week about the cost, how to book it, and other questions like that. And then the week after that, I'll be doing a Q&A for anybody who had any other questions about the Ielts test. So make sure you go follow me over on Instagram. It's at louisewarearmstrong, because I'll be uploading a question box very shortly where you can ask your questions about that Ielts test. So me and my partner Jake took our Ielts test on exactly the same day, and we did it in Brantford. That was the closest place we could take it. Before the pandemic, I do believe you could have took it in Niagara Falls, Hamilton, but at this current time when I was online looking to where to book it, that was the closest place with the closest time. So we booked it, and 3 weeks later, I think it was. So we booked it for a date, and 2 weeks later they called us to let us know that it was cancelled and we had to reschedule for the day before or the day after. And they said it was because that they wasn't booked up for that day. So they only go ahead with the day if there is a certain amount of people that are wanting to take the test. So our test was for 1:50 p.m. so literally 10 to 2 in the afternoon. So in the top tip video that I'm going to be doing next week, I will talk about why that was the best slot as well. It just so happened that we ended up having the best slot, and there was a number of reasons behind it. So we arrived at the college at 1 o'clock, so that's 15 minutes before the exam. They send out an email the day before saying that you need to be at the venue 20 minutes before. Now we arrived 15 minutes before just because we were wanting to get there nice and early, revise while we were in the car. And it was very, very lucky that we did arrive that early, because at 1:10, so that's 40 minutes before our exam, they gave us a call saying that they're running ahead of schedule, and if we were nearby, they can allow us into the building early. So we went in 40 minutes early. Now we had to go in one at a time, and the gentleman asked me at the door if we took the online COVID screening. Now we didn't know anything about this, so if you are going to do your Ielts test, just see if online, if there is a wellness check before you go, because this will make your process go a little bit quicker than ours. So we didn't know about this, so we didn't do this. We were greeted by a security man in the lobby. It was just him in there with a whiteboard with some questions on and some masks and some gloves, and we had to go in one at a time. And there were the wellness check questions in front of you that you had to read aloud to the security guard and answer yes or no. So for example, have you had any symptoms? No. Have you been contacted to let you know that you've been around someone with COVID symptoms? No. And just the normal questions that you get asked if you're going to your workplace. So then after you read the questions and you said no to all of them, he then took you to the corner and you had to change your masks. So this is a little tip. Don't wear your material or your branded masks into an Ielts test, because they're gonna ask you to change them anyway. They made me take mine off and they threw it away, and they made me put another one on. He then just says, follow the arrows upstairs. So this is where I was greeted by a lady who asked me my first and last name and the time of my appointment, and asked me if I had any belongings on me. Now this was something I wasn't sure about, what you were allowed to bring into an Ielts test, because they do tell you you need to leave everything in the vehicle. So the only thing I had on me was the car keys. We have 2 car keys, and we took one each in case one of us got out before the other one, which was actually impossible when I go on to talk about the rest of the test. So I had my car keys and also my passport, because you need to take your passport in there as well. So she asked for my passport to write all down the information, and then she gave me back my passport and she asked me to give the car key, because the only thing that we were allowed on us was the passport. She even made me take my jacket off, which was like something I was going to leave on in case I was cold in the room, but I took my jacket off, I gave her my car key. The only thing I had on me was the clothes that I was wearing and my passport. That was literally it. No watches, no rings, no jewelry, no nothing. And she put it in a plastic bag. She stapled my name to the bag, and then she told me to follow the arrows through to the next room. So when we went to the next room, there was a wall, and on that wall there was everyone's bags of belongings. So just to let you know, you can take your purse, your phone. I obviously didn't know this because they do tell you in the email not to bring it in with you, but if you do, they will just put it in a bag, they'll staple your bag together, and then it'll be left on the wall. I then went and put my bag on the wall, and then I was welcomed by another lady. So this lady asked for my passport, so I gave her my passport, and she asked me to stand on the white wall, and this is where they take your photo for your certificate at the end, and also to prove it was you. And then she had your passport, and she was just making sure it was the same person. I found this really, really funny because she took ages looking at my passport photo and the photo she took, as if she didn't think it was actually me, which is absolutely hilarious. But I think it's because the English passport is very faint, like it's really, really hard to see the photo, so she was trying to get it in the light, and I just thought it was hilarious. Then she gave me my passport back and told me to follow the arrows back downstairs. Now this was the check-in process. We now move on to the test straight away. So the check-in process took in total around 5 to 10 minutes. Reading out the wellness check, going to sign in and getting your photo done only took 5 to 10 minutes. Now the next step is something that I just want to prepare people for. Obviously I'm talking about taking the Ielts test in Brantford, Ontario in Canada. I don't know what it's like in any other venue. This is purely just this venue, and if you've took it somewhere else, then I would love to know down below if this was a similar experience or not, or if this is just something they did in this specific place. When they gave me my passport back and told me to follow the arrows downstairs, I didn't realize that as soon as you go downstairs, this is the start of your speaking test. Like, I thought I was going to go down to a waiting room, I'll get called into a room. Like, I didn't have time to like process from checking in to going into my exam, but honestly it was straight in. So I walked down the stairs. As soon as I got to the bottom of the stairs, they looked at my name and said room on the left. I went into the room on the left, sat down, and he said, okay, your speaking exam is about to start. And honestly, I felt like my whole life just flashed before my eyes, because honestly I didn't have a clue that the speaking test was first, starter. So just to let you know, in this specific place, the speaking test is first. And second, I didn't realize I was walking into this test, and I started to panic, and that's probably the worst thing to do, because you have to be calm for the speaking test, especially for me, because I start to stutter when I'm put under pressure. So he called me into the room, he sat me down and said, this is the start of your speaking test. It's going to be approximately 20 minutes. And then he started with the speaking test. So this is going to be part one. It's going to be talking about all about the speaking test and what questions I had in the test. Now, just a reminder, there are hundreds of different questions, so you're not particularly gonna end up with the same question as me. If you are, then that is very lucky, because you've had time to practice. And it's so important not to plan out what you're gonna say. So once you've heard my question, don't go away thinking I need to say this, 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 and this, because they will know it will look staged, and you can actually lose points for that. The whole point of the speaking test is just to hear that you can speak fluent English and you don't stumble across your words. So if you've got something memorized in your head, there is a quite possibility that you're going to stumble on it if you don't get the right word at the right time. So this is something that I really highly recommend, and as a tip, don't prepare your answers. So when you're going to take these mock questions that you have on YouTube and on the apps, don't plan your answers, just keep practicing talking over and over again. There were so many times when I go or and when I got my feedback back, they still scored me really high. They said every time she stumbled because she was thinking of the question, not because she didn't know what words to say. So it doesn't matter if you stutter or you stumble, they're just literally looking to see if you can speak English. How they will start it is, my name is blah blah, and I will be the adjudicator of the speaking test. Can I please ask your name? And then I'll just say, my name is Louise Ware, and then they would say, and please can you tell me what you would like to be called during this? And I said, Louise. And the first question he said is, we're gonna talk about sport. And in my head straight away, I was like, sport, I don't watch sport, oh my God. But you shouldn't think like that. So he said, I would like you to tell me now if you're someone who enjoys sports, what's your favorite sports? Did you take part in any sports while you were at school? And the first thing that clicked in my head is dance is a sport, and obviously I was a professional dancer, so I felt extremely lucky that I got this question, like so lucky, because I can talk about dance for hours. Like, people don't need to stop me when we talk about dance. Just remember the question when you are answering it, because you do need to tick off the questions that he asked. And the whole time he was opposite me just going, like his head couldn't stop shaking. He was just like, because obviously they can't reply because they are recording what I'm saying and they can't interfere with what I'm saying. So they're just literally opposite you, like. And then he said, perfect, now we're going to move on to the next question. And that was literally, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes, which doesn't sound a lot, but at the time it felt about 10 minutes. But it was honestly about 2 to 3 minutes, if that. The best thing to do is answer the question, get to the point, and then move on. They don't want you to talk for 10 to 15 minutes long. They want you to answer the question and move on. Like I said, the whole test is supposed to take 20 minutes. That was the first part of the speaking test. Like I said, I felt extremely grateful that I got that question, because I will go on to Jake's question in just a little second, and I'm just so grateful. My manifestation worked and I got a question that I could answer very confidently. He said, section 2, we're going to talk about being competitive. Now in my head straight away I think, yes, this is good. I'm a very competitive person, I always have been. So I was super happy with this question as well. So he said, I would like to know, are you a competitive person? Have you been in any situations where you've had to compete for something? And you know me, again, 2 minutes, it was really easy. I just explained that as a professional dancer, I've always competed at the age of 4. Again, it was 2 to 3 minutes long. That question actually went a lot quicker than the other question. And I think it's because at this point I'd relaxed and settled into the atmosphere, because at first it just took me by surprise. Now I knew that he was asking me about sports and competitiveness. Again, he was just nodding his head opposite me, and then we moved on to question number 3. I do believe the questions get harder as the test goes on, and that is something that I've watched about other people's tests as well, is that the last question was always the most intelligent question, and you have to take a different approach to it. And I definitely felt that throughout the exam. They started off really easy, what's your name, what's your favorite sport. They then go on to talk about the past, the present and the future, answering questions, and then they go into more debate questions. So then they go on to talk about competitiveness again. If I think it's good to have competition within a preschool, a primary school. So I can't remember the question exact, but he basically was asking me, thinking was it a good idea to have competition at such a young age? When they give you this like debate question, it's always important to show both ends. So you show why you're for it, why you're against it, and then your overall. So I talked about how the good end of it, so when I think it is good because it makes children grow, it makes children learn, and then the bad and friendships, it can make people feel sad if they lose. And my overall opinion of, I think it should happen within schools at a certain time. It shouldn't be all the time. And at this question, he actually talked back to me. Instead of just nodding his head, he said, but what about when a child's sad? When I started talking about why I was for the argument. And then when I was against the arguments, he would be like, but isn't it good for them to grow? So he was trying to do as a backwards and forth thing. I don't know if this is in every exam, like when they get to the 3rd question, this is something that they do. They want to see how you respond when they ask you a question on the spot. But again, I was very confident with this question, so I knew my answers straight away. And every time he threw me a little curveball, I just told him what I thought. This is the question that I felt like I had to think about a little bit more. So this next step, he said, I'm going to show you a piece of paper with a question on it. You have to talk about this for 3 to 4 minutes. I will stop you if we get to that point, but I would like you to now to take a few minutes to write any notes down that you have. And then there was a piece of paper in front of me and a pencil, and the first thing he did was turn it round, and then he sat back down. And then on the piece of paper, it basically said, talk about a sporting event that you have been to, why you were there, and who you were there with. Now, in my head, I just had so many different ideas and thinking, oh, I could talk about this, I could talk about this. But it doesn't matter that overall what you talk about, you just have to be able to talk about it to 3 to 4 minutes, something you're passionate about. So the thing I could think of is when I performed in Wembley, because I knew that I could talk a lot about that. I could talk about why I was there, who I was there with, because any other event, like I went and watched Liverpool play, but it's nothing I'm really passionate about, so I wouldn't have been able to talk about it in much detail. So I talked about how I performed there. It was for the semi-finals of the England rugby. I was there because I auditioned, and I literally had so much to talk about. And on the notes, I wasn't writing sentences. I literally wrote points, because you have to answer every part of that question. I was just writing points like who I was there with. So I literally put a name or a dance company. Did I enjoy it? What I felt like I literally just wrote pointers. And when I actually got round to answering the question, I never looked down at that piece of paper once. I think because I wrote it all down and in my head I knew what I was going to say, I didn't need to look down. It was something, like I said, it was very passionate about. It's not a made up story. I think if I had to make something up for this question, I would have been constantly looking down, making sure I was making sense. There was a few times I went and repeated myself, but it's not the end of the world. They obviously do mark you on repetition within this question, but I didn't repeat myself too much, I don't believe, especially when I seen my mark when it came back. So I was overall really happy with that, how that went. Just make sure when you've got that few minutes to write down anything on a piece of paper, write down the answers to the questions that they're gonna ask. Once you've answered that, then you can ramble for the next 3 to 4 minutes. That is what I'm gonna say. There was one more part of the test. So once I talked for 3-4 minutes, he said, we've now reached the end of the test. I'm just gonna ask you one more question. What did he say? I can't remember the exact words. It was something along the lines of, do you think sports will heal world peace? Or something more intelligent than the other questions that he had asked me. Now at first I'm thinking world peace. I literally know nothing about world peace, but then I turned the question around in my head and thought about the questions he's asked me before and how I could answer it and feel confident. So I talked about maybe he's thinking about competitiveness, whether it's like not making world peace because there's competitiveness between the countries. So I just talked about the Olympics and how we all come together in the Olympics. Even though it's country against country, it's a very nice environment. And then he butt in and was like, but what about football? There's such rivalry in football. And then he was actually a backwards and throw-in, especially in this question. As other questions, he just let me speak. In this one, he was definitely making me think a little bit more harder, definitely condescending everything that I was saying. Throughout the whole of my speaking test, I did not use big words at all. As a speaking day-to-day, I never use big words. I'm not the intelligent person where big words come out. And I think it's so important to be yourself in the speaking test, and that will get you the most points. Because if I was using big words left, right and center, they might not have been put in the right sentences because I didn't know what the word meant. So don't revise big words. Just be you, especially if you're from England and English is your first language. You should be confident in what you do. You've been speaking English since the day that you were born. So yeah, just be confident, be you. So I'm just going to talk about the overall speaking test now. You go into it extremely quickly. I wish I was more prepared for it, and that is why I'm making this video, just so I can tell you my experiences. It was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, and I felt overall really confident after I took the exam. I'm just going to briefly touch on Jake's questions. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because I don't want this video to be super long, but I just want to let you know the other questions that you could be asked, and especially from a different angle, because his questions were definitely a lot harder than mine. So his questions were on science. what's the best thing scientists have made, and all about science. He didn't tell me exactly the questions, but this is something I knew I wouldn't be able to answer as a person because I'm not into science at all. I don't know how I would have reacted in that situation, and it could have been a completely different score. But he was very honest with the examiner and said, science isn't my forte, I know nothing about science. And he went on to talk about the COVID vaccine. So this is something that he is very clever at, as being a compere on stage for most of his life. He's very good at turning the questions. So he started talking about the COVID vaccine. I would have never even thought of that. So he got a really good mark as well. He actually got the same mark as me. So it actually proves that even if you know nothing about the question they asked, you can somehow think of a way to turn it around to a question you can answer really, really well. And because my test was during COVID, we weren't allowed to take our masks off at all during the speaking exam. The adjudicator had a mask on and I had a mask on. This was something I was really worried about when I sat down and he didn't say to take my mask off. I was thinking, oh my God, is he gonna be able to hear me? And I just made sure that I was speaking a little bit louder than I normally do, just so he could hear what I was saying. But that was something that I was very surprised at. I thought he would say that we could take our masks off because he was 6 feet away from me. But you keep the mask on the whole time through the speaking test. Okay, so after the speaking test was done, he said, thank you very much, that is the end of your exam. And he told me to follow the arrows back upstairs. It was literally amazing, this place. I don't know how I didn't get lost. When I reached the top of the stairs, we then got took into a computer room where there was a bunch of people sat in front of computers. There was like 3 or 4 computers left at this point. And I went down into my seat and she just said, we're gonna have to wait for the rest of the people to enter. They offered us a bottle of water, they offered us a snack, and they said if we needed to use the washroom, to use the washroom now, but we had to give our passport to an adjudicator. They would walk us to the bathroom and then would come back. They would give us our passport back and then we had to sit back down. I was sat down, I would say, for about 10 minutes before I realized that you could actually talk in this room. I was super silent, the whole room was silent, but then some people started talking and like the adjudicators were in there, so I was like, we must be able to talk. So I just turned to the gentleman at the side of me, just asked him where he was from, how long he's been sat there. He was from Turkey and he'd been sat there for 2 hours. So his test was early in the morning and he had to wait for everyone else to take their speaking test. At this point, he said he'd been through like 5 bottles of water and loads of snacks. And yeah, he was very drained and I could tell that by the look of him. And it was actually, it looked like it was nice that he could talk to someone because he'd been sat there for like 2 hours. So I was sat in that room for about 20 minutes in total before the exam started. So I was extremely lucky because I know a lot of people were in there a lot longer than me. So after the 20 minutes, the adjudicators came in and said, from this moment on, we are now in exam. We are now in the exam, so you're no longer allowed to go to the washroom. I'm going to talk through the rules of each section before starting, so please make sure you listen. They said there's cameras all around the room watching, and then they went to go talk about the listening test. The listening test was the next test in the exam. She read out rules which took about 5 minutes before, just stating that there are headphones to the left-hand side of you, that you're not allowed to start the exam until we say so, and if we need the washroom, you're not allowed to go during the listening test. The listening test in all will take about 20 to 30 minutes. And yeah, she just read the rules. They then handed out pieces of paper. On this pieces of paper, it said our username and it said our password. We wasn't allowed to type it in until they said so. When they said that we were allowed, we started typing it in. Any problems, you could raise your hand, but it was pretty straightforward. Type your username, type your password, and then it came up the screen with your name, your date of birth, and it just said, is this you, confirm or decline? And then the screen just went blank, and then she said when everybody signed in, the exam will start, so you can put your headphones on. In the top right hand corner of the computer, there is a sound bar, so you can change how loud or how quiet you want. Also, when you first sign in, you can change the font size, so you can have it small, medium, large, extra large. You can also change the color of the screen. Now this is brilliant for especially someone like me who's got dyslexia. I know some people work better with a green or a blue or a yellow background. For me, I just kept it light blue because it was actually a really nice color for my eyes, but you can change it all. But I'm just gonna say, don't fiddle around with those settings if you don't need to. Don't be like, you're bored, so you're like, oh, I'm gonna go with this font. Like how you are on MSN as a kid, trying to pick your font and your color. Like this is an exam, you need to focus. So don't be going around playing with the colors and the sizes. Literally have a size you can read, pick a volume one, and don't touch the color if you don't need to touch the color. When everyone logged in, it popped up with the questions. It had the timer at the very bottom of the screen all the way through it, and it had all of the questions, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like along the bottom as well, so it sees where you are. Now the listening exam all starts at exactly the same time, so make sure you have your headphones on and you can hear it, and it starts near enough straight away. One thing to remember during the listening exam is that they do not repeat the recording. So if you missed an answer, you can't go back to that point to try and listen to it. So just write anything down, and it's so important to just keep your head looking at the questions, because like I said, if you haven't read the question before she tells you the answer and you miss it, you're not going to get any points because you can't go back to it. They do give you a minute at the end of the exam to go over your answers, but it's basically just pointless because you can't remember what was said in that speech. Something that I used that last minute for was spelling, because they do mark you on your spelling. If you spelled something wrong, then you obviously don't get a point for it. So that minute at the end of the listening exam, I literally just went back to check all of the spellings. You also have a piece of paper and pencil in front of you to make notes. But I'm gonna be honest, during the listening exam, I didn't even have time to pick up my pencil. I literally had my hands on the keyboard, looking at the questions, and as soon as they said the answer, I was typing away, click tab, which brings you on to the next question. I'm gonna be honest, I would revise for the listening test, because you need to get in the habit of listening to the answer and writing it down straight away without trying to think too hard. So just be really careful. I'm trying not to complicate it too much, but the listening is something that I definitely wish I revised a little bit more on, because it's the timing thing that I really struggled with. But overall, for the listening exam, there was just 2 or 3 questions that I felt like I couldn't give an answer to because I completely missed it in the speech. But it was near the end of the exam where it gets extremely hard and extremely difficult. It was about plants and how long they grow for and what environments, and oh my goodness, my head was just blown apart. I still got on a reasonable score for my listening test, I believe. Yeah, that was the listening test. So once the listening test was ended, they came around and collected our pieces of paper. Even if you scribbled on it or wrote whatever you did on it, they still collect it. They don't look at it. It doesn't go towards any points. They just have to take it off you. And then the computer goes back to the login screen. Every test has a different username and a different password, and they give it to you before each exam. So the next part of the test was the reading test. So once they handed all the pieces of paper back, they then went on to the rules of the reading test. It was exactly the same minutes. It's around 20 to 30 minutes. This time you were allowed to go to the bathroom. So they said you're allowed to go to the bathroom, the washroom, whatever they call it over here, as soon as the exam starts, but you're not allowed to go in the last 10 minutes of the exam. Now you do have a timer on your screen, so you know when you can go. I advise if you need the washroom, go right at the start before you even start the test, because you don't want to start it, go to the washroom and come back and be completely out of like zone, and you don't want to leave it too long to think, oh, I'll go once I finish, hopefully it's 10 minutes before and then I'll run, because you don't want to think the whole time, oh my god, I need the washroom. I've heard so many stories by some of you guys that have reached out to me saying that you were desperate for the toilet during one of the tests, which completely put your mind off of it. So I highly recommend, as soon as the test starts, if you need the washroom, go straight away, be as quick as you can, and then come back. So reading for me, I would say, is the hardest out of every single exam this day. For me, reading is so hard because of my dyslexia, but they also have the answers of yes, no, and not given. And for me, no and not given, I find in some situations are really hard to tell the difference, especially in the pieces that they give you. I feel like they tricked you and maybe it was not given and you put no, and oh my god. So for me, if I was to ever take the test again, I would revise reading the most, 100%. Second section was where I had to fill in the blanks. I found this a lot easier than the yes and no and not given, because you are given a piece of like a statement which is on an A4 piece of paper, and you had to fill in the blanks, and it says give 1 word or give 2 words where the blank is, and it's quite easy because it's on the screen. You can point to things, you can also highlight. Now this was a massive tip that I'm going to tell you guys. So for example, it says the flowers are yellow and they grow most in blank, and then you have to give a month in that blank, go to where it talks about growth in the saying and then highlight it. The way you can highlight it is drag across it so it goes highlighted, then right hand click and it goes pin or highlight. If you click highlight, it means that it'll go yellow, and you know that that part is the bit that you need to look at for that answer. I used highlight throughout the whole of the reading test, just making sure I was getting to the right point, because when you look at an A4 piece of paper of full-on writing, you get a bit blown away. Well, I do, and I'm like, there's just so many words there that I need to look, especially in the last test, the last part of the reading test. It was extremely big words that I've never even heard of. It was talking about environments and what animals, it was about, yeah, fish environments, what fish works better in what seas and what countries, and oh my goodness, it was just way too intelligent for me. So when they started talking about the pearl was the first question, I would highlight everywhere it said the word pearl and the sentence that went through it. So I knew that I had to look at all of those sentences about the pearl to get the answer. And then I unhighlighted it all. The next thing was about shrimp. So I highlighted everything that was to do with shrimp so I could look back. I hope that makes sense, but that's like a little tip from me. For someone like me who doesn't read and doesn't read books, because of my dyslexia, I found that extremely hard, and that's the one section I would recommend to maybe revise a little bit more on. So at the end of the exam, they took away the pieces of paper again. They then just moved straight on to the next one. This one was an hour long, so the writing was an hour long, which was extremely long. At this point, we'd been in there for about 3.5 hours, I want to say, nearly 4 hours. So it is a very long exam. And they just told us that they will bring round again the paper. It will last an hour. You can go to the washroom during the writing exam as long as it's not in the 10 minutes. So again, if you need the washroom, go in the very first seconds of the exam starting, so then you have plenty of time to come back. The writing exam is something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy writing stories, even though I can't spell to save my life. I'm very an imaginative person, and I love writing stories, etc. So I was actually really excited for this. Now the first half of the exam, there's two halves, writing a letter and then there's the debate. So the writing a letter, they give you who you'll be writing it to. So it could be to a friend, it could be to a boss, it could be to a teacher, it could literally be to anyone. And now you have to pay attention, because this is how you're going to reply to them. So for example, if it was your friend, you would be a little bit more relaxed with how you're talking to them. You wouldn't be very formal. And if it was a teacher, you would be a little bit more professional with them. And they're looking at that. My question was to a high school teacher. He was doing a careers day, and he wanted someone to come in and talk to the students about their job and what they do. So I had to write to the teacher to persuade him to choose me to come in. Now, I was thought of loads of ideas. I actually used my piece of paper for this and the pencil to write down my ideas. And then after I wrote down all my ideas, I thought the best thing to do is to do something I know and talk about my job. So when I was working in the holiday parks, I just thought I would just do that. I know so much about the job, it'll be easy to talk about. You need to write at least 150 words, and do not go too much over it, because I've just recently found out that's how you can lose points as well. So try and stick to the 150, 200 mark. And yeah, I was overall really, really happy with this letter. I didn't spend too long on it. The most important tip of the writing exam is you get an hour, spend 20 minutes on the letter, the last 40 minutes on the last point, because that's where you get your most points. So you don't want to spend too long on the letter, because it's not as much marks as the overall of the other one. So then I moved on to the next one, and this is where they give you a argument. You have to show your arguments to and against this, and mine was most legal age of driving is 18. Do you think that they should up the age limit of driving? And for this one, you have to write 250 words. I found it so hard to stay in this limit. I think I wrote actually double, which is 500, because I literally couldn't write it in 250 words. I literally couldn't. So I maybe lost a few marks here because of how many words I wrote. I knew my spelling wasn't the best, and that's probably where I lost a few more points. But overall, I was happy with what I wrote. Like I said, this was the only point that I used the pencil and paper. It was definitely not as hard as the reading test, but then again, it's one of those ones where if my spelling is horrendous, this is where I'm going to lose the most points. Once you finish the exam, they just let us exit the room row by row, collect our belongings and go. And they told us we would get our results in 2 to 3 business days, which is nice and quick. I did hear if you had the paper one, it does take maybe 2 weeks. Please quote me if I'm wrong, but I know it does take longer than the computer one. But I hope you enjoyed my story time. Like I said, overall, it was nowhere near as hard as I thought it was. I'm gonna share my top tips and what scores I got in next week's video, so make sure you stay around for that. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you're new here, I'd love you to hit subscribe. And yeah, I wish everyone the best of luck if you're taking the Ielts test anytime soon. I am going to have a video on how I revised and what I used to revise, and I think it is so important to revise just so you know the structure of the questions. You don't want to go in blinded. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, I will see you next week in another information video. Bye!